Melissa Van Dyke has been the president of the Incentive Research Foundation for 8 years. During this time, she's proudly helped triple the organization's research and education footprint. She came over from IRF, from that position there as managing consultant of the employee engagement practice at Merritt's. And speaking of Merritt's, just wanted to put in a note in a related field. At 1:30, Jesse from Merritt's will be doing a seminar on artificial intelligence, so you might want to keep that in mind if you can slip in there. Melissa has been named one of the top 25 women in the meeting industry by Meeting and Conventions magazine. So IESP is just thrilled to welcome Melissa Van Dyke.
Thank you very much. We are very excited to be here as the Incentive Research Foundation. And welcome to what I understand is the closing keynote for the 2018 IMA Summit. Thank you to IESP for having the IRF here, and to Karen and to the board for all of the great work that you do. You've been wonderful partners to the Incentive Research Foundation for many years, and we can't thank you enough for that. But you've also done a fantastic job, I have to say, on this event. I've been so impressed. I've only been here for about 24 hours, and it looks like a few people might have journeyed beyond last night, journeyed beyond their drinking and sleeping limitations. But I'm glad that you're all here to join me this morning. I think it's such a great time to be having this conversation about journeying beyond. And I'm really impressed that that is what your leaders chose as the topic for discussion. And here's why. Let's talk about journeys for a minute. Who's been in this industry for more than 10 years? Oh, awesome, a lot of us. Anybody been in the industry less than 10 years? Oh, cool. It's actually a really, really good balance in here. Well, for those of us who have been around for more than 10 years, it's been a little bit of a journey, hasn't it? It's been a heck of a ride over the last 10 years. And I remember stepping into this position, as you just heard, about 8 or 9 years ago, and they were asking me to look at trend lines, and I'm like, oh my God, it looks like an EKG. Like, you can't even really find trend lines, you're just going to find a flat line. But we've had quite a journey over the last 10 years, and now we're at a place where things are a little more stable, that we can start talking about how we marry all of that knowledge that we've gained over the last few decades with really recent and relevant, what I like to call sushi-grade data on how non-cash rewards are being used in U.S. business, so that we can help those businesses move beyond to higher levels of engagement and performance. So, I will tell you, I am not a reformed, I am actually a full-on data geek, and I sit on tons of data. As you heard, I'm president of the Incentive Research Foundation. Who has not heard of the Incentive Research Foundation before this event, by chance? Anybody not? Who has heard of us? So everybody's heard of us before this event? Okay, well that's super exciting, because when I started doing this, nobody had really heard of us. But the Incentive Research Foundation, for those of you, and I know I met a couple of people last night who weren't really familiar with who we are, but we're a nonprofit research foundation. Believe it or not, we've been around for about 20 years in one form or another. During that time, we've dedicated millions of dollars to research and education on the topic of what all of us in this room do, right? Engagement and motivation and incentives in the workplace. At any given moment, we have 17 different research studies that are in various stages of completion. We release one study a month that you see here, so I encourage you to go out and take a look at our website. We are a foundation, we are not an association, we don't have membership, but we do depend on our research partners, our advocacy partners, which I know many of you are here in this room, and thank you to IESP and IMA for being one of those partners, for getting our work done. We look at two different types of research, which we're going to talk about today. The first one is academic research, and the second one is marketing research. We have a fantastic marketing researcher, Ms. Meg Withington, who's our chief marketing advisor. But we look at both of those because they're really important sides to the same coin. The academic researchers have the very difficult job of going out and doing controlled field experiments to understand, isolate the question and understand how those variables impact each other, right? Marketing researchers, like Meg over here, have a very tough job of looking broadly at the market and understanding the many variables that are impacting the market as we progress on this journey. So what is it that we've kind of been experiencing over the last couple of decades in this space? Well, something to know. So back in the 1960s, if you were to start a job and you rolled into your job on the first day, I would come up and greet you and I would say, "Hi, my name is Melissa Van Dyke, and I am the personnel and training manager who will be taking care of you on your first day." Because HR, as we currently know it, didn't exist back in the 1960s. And by the way, you have a core job. Here's your job title. Here's your job description. Please make sure that you do that job, and only that job. Otherwise, I'm going to hear it in personnel. We really care about retention here at the partnership, so we're going to invest in you. We're going to help you climb that corporate ladder. We're going to give you great benefits. We're going to invest in your education ongoing through tuition reimbursement. We have a really deep hierarchy at the partnership, and we want to help you rise up that ladder, but make sure you're starting as a team member that you don't step over and kind of try to do some of the manager's roles or vice versa, because then, again, I'm going to hear about it in personnel. And by the way, if you do want to climb that corporate ladder, we have a huge training department on the 5th floor, which I'm more than happy to walk you up to. I run that as well. We're going to help you rise that ladder, kind of go up that ladder. And on the 7th floor is actually our R&D department, so I will introduce you to Norm, who runs research and development, and they can help you push all of those great ideas through the pipeline. And we know it's kind of stressful working at the partnership, so if you feel like you need to take a smoke break, no need to go outside. Just make sure that you ash out in the ashtray that's built into your desk, right? And if you need to take a little nip because you're a little stressed at the end of the day, there is a bar located back behind the steno pool. Feel free to help yourself. If you get a lot of control, no worries. What happens within the partnership stays within the partnership. Not a big deal, because you're in marketing and you know that our brand is really what we paste on the outside of our organization and all the images that we put out there to represent ourselves. And by the way, that might include things like, I don't know, husbands spanking wives and people in blackface and babies smoking cigarettes. But anyway, welcome to your first day on the job. And if you would please follow me, I would like to introduce you to your team. Anybody watch Mad Men? Yeah, love Mad Men. And it is actually in many ways a great depiction of what work looked like back in the 1960s. So why does that matter and why should we care? Well, some really, really important reasons. First of which is that businesses still had a lot of the same concerns that we have today. They were really concerned about retention, just like we are today. They were concerned about it for different reasons, because they'd seen businesses fold during the Great Depression because they didn't have succession planning. But they're still very concerned about retention and engagement. The other most important reason that we need to understand what work looked like back then is because that is where modern compensation systems grew up. How and where people got rewarded for work is based in these post-World War II, 1940s and 1950s, late 50s actually, economy. That's where compensation systems grew up. But something happened post-1960s and in the few years after, that our workplace has gone from looking a lot like this to looking a little more like this. Anybody watch Office Space? Yeah? So we've got our wonderful friends Michael, Scott, and Jim, Pam, and Dwight, and they all work in Scranton, Pennsylvania. They're at the paper plant there. But the interesting thing about that, if you were starting at Dunder Mifflin today, I would come in and I would welcome you, and I'd say, "Welcome to Dunder Mifflin. I am your Chief Human Resources Officer. Here is your core job role." It's no longer really a box. There's going to be a little line there somewhere in the description that says, "Other duties as assigned." Right? Anybody gotten bitten by the other duties as assigned in your work and job description? The average footprint of the American job has grown a third just since the downturn, by the way. So that other duties as assigned is going to come into play a lot in your job at Dunder Mifflin, especially in dealing with Dwight. But anyway, we don't really have big benefits anymore, but we do expect you to keep investing in your career. We want you to be really up on your skills. We don't have, again, a tuition reimbursement program, but we still expect you to take on that role and stay up on your skills. We are very vested in you here and concerned about retention, but we don't really have a big hierarchy. And if you haven't heard, Pam and Jim are getting married. And they're going out on their honeymoon, so we're going to need you to kind of pinch hit and take over managing their projects for a little while they're gone. And you're doing such a good job at that. Dwight is really freaking out all of the new trainees that are coming in. So if you could pinch hit and also be a trainer, that would be fantastic because we're really starting to staff up. Oh, and by the way, innovation really matters to us at Dunder Mifflin, so if you could also join our innovation team and give us your ideas, which by the way, you don't own the intellectual property to anymore at the end of, and you can't take those ideas anywhere else, we own them per law, but if you could contribute to our innovation teams, that would be fantastic. And we care about your wellness at Dunder Mifflin, so if you could engage in our wellness program, that would be fantastic because we also want to keep our premiums low, right? And by the way, we don't just care what you do, we care how you do it, because you're in marketing and you know that we're no longer this black box, right? We're this glass box, and everything that happens in Dunder Mifflin kind of makes it outside those walls. So if you could do everything that you do in line with the Dunder Mifflin organizational values, that would be great. And do your core job, right? What were modern compensation systems set up to address? Were they circle or the squares? The circles. Modern compensation systems were only set up to address the circle. And the problem with that is, how do you think companies in the modern environment differentiate? Is it through core jobs, or is it through these other non-core job roles? Well, I can give you a hint. Every technology company has programmers. Every financial company has financial analysts, right? The way that companies differentiate, and this is what a number of books and studies are finding, but the way that companies differentiate in the new environment is how they engage people in these non-core job roles that we ask them to do. So we had a researcher named Dr. Teresa Wellborn a couple of years ago that was going out to look at engagement in the US because the levels of engagement, as we know, are changing. And she titled the study, Engaged in What? Because one of the things that businesses are doing a really terrible job of right now is helping people understand which of these core job roles, or non-core job roles, I'm sorry, they should be engaged in. Which ones take priority, right? So the first thing that businesses have to do is prioritize these non-core job roles. But most importantly, what she also found is that when we're trying to engage people in these non-core job roles, which are what differentiate us, non-cash rewards work really well for engaging people in non-core job roles. That's kind of important for us to understand, right? Well, if that's true, then we should kind of have seen some growth in our industry over the last couple of years, yeah? And that, in fact, we have. Over the last 20 years, there's been a 200% growth in the use of non-cash awards in the U.S. Back in 1996, when the Incentive Federation first started measuring the use of non-cash awards, only about a quarter of all U.S. businesses were using non-cash awards. Over the last 20 years, that has grown to 84% of all businesses are now using non-cash awards in some manner. Right? Why that matters? One of the most important things, the first thing I want you to remember from this presentation today is it is no longer about if business is using non-cash awards. Our challenge as an industry is where are they being used and how are they being used. It is no longer about if. It is about where and it is about how. Right? So, what do we know about where and how non-cash awards are being used? Well, back in 1996, when the Incentive Federation first started looking at this, sales was the most common population for non-cash awards. Back in 2016, just a couple of years ago, almost 3/4 of all U.S. businesses were targeting their non-cash awards at their employee audience. About 60% were still targeting their non-cash awards at their sales audience, 45% at their customers, and about a little over 40% at their channel. If you're not familiar with channel, that's where original equipment manufacturers like HP are pushing product through their partnerships. So not only have we seen kind of where non-cash rewards are playing change by audience, we're also seeing the types of rewards in play change over the last 20 years as well. Back in 1996, when we were first looking at this, we were only asking about merchandise, a little bit about vouchers, and about travel. Back in 2016, we now have 3/4 of businesses using gift cards to reward and recognize at least one of their core audiences. About 60% of U.S. businesses have some level of corporate gifting program that they use with their clients. About 60% have a merchandise program, ongoing merchandise program with their employees, customers, or channel partners. About half are using award points, which we weren't even asking about in 1996, and about 40% are using travel. So we've had this proliferation of the types of awards that are being used in business as well. And here's the thing, it's not just that they're using one award over the other. The average business is using 2 or 3 of these awards. And actually, as we broke this down into, I think, 10 or 11 on our top performer study, was it 10, right? 10. About 10 different types of awards when you get down into whether people are doing plaques and pats on the backs and things like that. People were using, I think, 7 or 8 different types, right? So there's this great use of different types of awards in organizations as well. It's not about one or the other. It's about how the different types are being used within the organization. So that's kind of the journey we've been on and where we are, but what do we know about where we're headed? And the truth is, I don't have a crystal ball, and nobody really does, but we had some really smart people at the World Economic Forum, at the Corporate Executive Board, at PricewaterhouseCoopers, that are giving us kind of an idea of where things might be headed. And as Michelle talked about yesterday, where it's headed is that HR, as we talk about it today, is kind of going away, right? 50%, I think Michelle said, of the current HR people are no longer going to be employed in the next few years. So HR, as we understand it, is changing. And that makes sense because one of the statistics that the World Economic Forum is putting out there is that in the next 30 years, only about 10%, as low as 10% of the U.S. workforce will be permanent full-time employees, right? The vast majority of workers will engage with a business based on project-based work. So you'll show up and say, hi, I'm your talent manager. My name is Melissa Van Dyke, and I'm your talent manager, and welcome to, we're glad that you engaged on this project. You found us through something probably like Odesk, which doesn't exist now, where I put my skills out there, and I just look for a set of skills as I go through and plan my projects that I'm executing for the year. I saw that you went to an online university. I'm hoping you stay engaged with them because we're no longer investing in people, we're actually investing in the universities and the programs that they run. And because business, the office space is so expensive and it's really inflexible, and by the way, the things that we're creating aren't physical products, we don't really have a whole lot of office space, so we're going to expect you and your entire team to work virtually. So we're going to meet them on a Zoom call in about 1 or 2 hours. So you'll all meet face-to-face by Zoom. If you have any questions or need some ongoing training, please plug into our online training database. It's always there and available to you. We also have an ongoing innovation contest. It's open to all employees, although there's only about 10% of those, all of our project-based people, all of our customers, and all of our partners. All of you work together on these innovation platforms, and we reward each other for your ideas. Because you are now responsible for all of your health investments, what we can do is encourage you and give you some discounts on things like those yoga classes and that Jamba Juice that you love so much. And I'm not really so much worried about what that if you align with our organizational brand. You know why? Because you chose us because your personal brand you feel aligns with our organizational brand, and that's why you decided to even put your project skills toward our organization. That looks a far cry from Dunder Mifflin, right? Kind of moving from Dunder Mifflin to something like this, right? This is what the workforce of the future looks like. And I gotta be honest, guys, I'm a full-time virtual employee. I work from a home office. Most of my team is virtual, so I'm kind of a guinea pig. And I don't have a she shed built out back, although it is on the list. I do want to point that out. But that is kind of where things are headed. And what we hope is that it's not kind of heading more toward this in the long run. Although much respect to whoever this is. If you can't see, they've got their beer on the right, they've got their Pringles on the left, and they are set up for work with me often. I've never taken a call from the John, just an FYI. I don't really plan to. But that's where things can head if we're not super duper careful. What was the first thing that I said you need to remember about this presentation? Does anybody actually remember? Sure. Anyone? What's the one thing I said? If you can remember, the first thing I want you to remember is this. It's not if non-cash rewards are being used, it's how and where non-cash rewards are being used, right? Because here's the deal. The operating system of U.S. business is changing really rapidly. So our second big challenge is not just to understand where and how they're being used, but it is to continuously update our database at that same speed to make sure we have really good data on where and how non-cash rewards are being used. And that doesn't look, and here's the thing is, I sit, no joke, in the last 3 years we will have done roughly 36 different studies, dedicated almost $2 million to research. I could sit up here and throw statistics at you all day long. We know that you're probably not going to remember all of those, because what really happens when we update that operating system and we update that database is that the conversations that we're having with our clients, internal and external, should be changing as well as we learn how to use that data, right? And I'm going to give you a really, it's going to kind of walk you through how an example happened in my head. May not be how it actually happened, but this is how it happened in my head. I actually did have a trustee who came to me and said that top performer study that you have, we actually had a consultant come in. And this is true in a lot of organizations. Big Five Consulting does not have non-cash rewards in their playbook. So what they do is they roll in and they say, we've got some big, hairy, audacious goals that we want you guys to meet. And so you're going to have to invest in all these things and give all your money to us. And you don't need to put in money into these things because they're not in our playbook. That's exactly what happened in his organization. He's like, so I took your top performer study in to talk to his internal client about why we need to keep doing about this. And again, this is probably not how it happened, but this is how it happened in my head. So the client comes in and he says, hey, you know what? Big Five Consulting is in and they're telling us that we need to start defunding some of these incentives and reward programs because we've got some big, hairy, audacious goals that we're going to go after. And those big, hairy, audacious goals are really going to make us an outlier and a top performer in our space, so we need to stop investing in incentives and rewards. And he goes, well, that's interesting, because, you know, vast majority of U.S. businesses, 84% are using non-cash rewards, so it's kind of interesting that they would recommend that. And he says, yeah, well, we're not really interested in average performance. We're interested in top performance. We want to be the outliers in our industry. I said, well, it's kind of interesting because there's a study by the Incentive Research Foundation that showed actually top-performing businesses in the U.S., meaning those with 5% year-over-year revenue growth, which, by the way, we only had 4%, those with 90% customer retention, by the way, we only had about 85% customer retention, and those organizations that also had 90% employee engagement and employee retention of their top performers, they use non-cash rewards at an even higher rate than average performing businesses, 15 to 30% higher, actually. So, kind of interesting that you would say that because about 90% of all top-performing businesses in the U.S. have an employee incentive program. About 80% have a channel program, which is what they were challenging most in this particular situation. And 90% of top-performing businesses have a non-cash sales incentive program. So I'm kind of fascinated that your Big Five consulting firm isn't really kind of telling you about some of this information that's out there. And he said, okay, that's kind of interesting. No, I didn't know that that study existed. What else came out of it? He said, well, it's kind of a couple of things that they found that are interesting is that top-performing businesses tend to think that non-cash rewards more often are memorable than cash. They tend more often to reach out to those external partners that we use for their expertise. And they're twice as likely, if you're really talking about big, hairy, audacious goals, they're twice as likely to strongly agree that their non-cash reward programs are effective retention tools, effective engagement tools, and effective recruitment tools. They're also more likely to say that that their non-cash reward and recognition system is a key performance management tool within their organization. And so finally, I would say that the client acquiesces a little bit and says, okay, that's good, maybe we'll keep investing and do some non-cash reward and recognition to stay competitive. You see, the funny thing about that is, funny you should mention that we're just going to do a little reward and recognition to stay competitive, because that's what average businesses do. The top performer study found that average businesses are more likely to say, or more likely to agree that their executives believe they do some reward and recognition to stay competitive. 93%, almost virtually all of top performing businesses, the program owners of those programs say their executives believe what they do with non-cash reward and recognition, they strongly agree it's a competitive differentiator to what they do. 93% of top performing businesses believe that their executives view their non-cash reward and recognition programs as a differentiator to what they do. Which now you've certainly got the interest of your internal client or external client, but now comes the question, okay, why? Why do they think that? This is kind of new information to me. I didn't know that all of this existed. Do you have any idea kind of on why that might be? I say, I don't know. Like, it could be a lot of reasons. There's a lot happening in the marketplace, but I can give you some indicators because there's some great research that's coming out from Harvard and the University of Pittsburgh about why non-cash rewards can evoke the highest level of performance for the lowest cost. Highest level of performance for the lowest cost for an organization. Okay, what do you have that kind of explains that? Well, there's this really interesting study done by these two financial professors. So they're in finance. They want to understand why these things are more cost effective, why non-cash rewards are more cost effective than cash. And they brought a whole bunch of people into a lab, and they said, hey, we got some movie tickets. How much do you think these movie tickets are worth? And the participants said, on average, I don't know, about $9.25. He said, that's great. Now, if you would please come over here, we're going to spend 2 hours doing a whole bunch of different tasks. And they walked through all of those different tasks, 2 hours doing a whole bunch of different tasks. And at the end of those tasks, they said, we're so thankful that you were here to participate in this lab experiment with us. We want to give you a reward. Guess what they rewarded them with? Movie tickets. Then they said, hey, just out of curiosity, what did you say those movie tickets were worth? Anyone want to guess what the movie tickets were now worth? $20, a good guess. $11.50. In 2 hours, the price of those movie tickets went from $9.25 to $11.50 because of the effort that people had put in to earn them. So the fascinating thing about that is there's actually a study now in behavioral economics that's supporting that, and it's called the IKEA effect. Anybody ever put together IKEA furniture? Yeah? So that's where it comes from, right? It's like we start, it's really inexpensive to buy IKEA furniture. By the time you get done with it and you're still married to your partner, God willing, you actually view it as a family heirloom, right? This is not staying in college and coming home with us, because the value of it, because of the effort you put into it, is so much greater. And that's actually a behavioral economic psychological effect that happens, and that happens with non-cash rewards. It does not happen with cash rewards. So, your client goes, okay, well that's interesting, but smarty pants, we are not a lab experiment, and these are not participants. These are our clients and our customers and our employees. You're going to have to give me something better than that. And you're like, well, funnily enough, it exists. Anybody follow Dan Ariely by chance? Yes. Yeah, I knew Michelle Rosen. Yes, Dan Ariely is fantastic. And he did this really great study in a semiconductor plant just about 4 or 5 years ago. And they walked into the semiconductor plant, 156 people on the first day. Everybody working in a semiconductor plant, and they said, if you exceed baseline performance by the end of the day, your personal baseline performance, you are going to get a reward. Baseline performance was calculated as the last 14 weeks of performance. So if you exceed your last 14 weeks of performance, baseline, by the end of today, you're going to get a reward. The first group was told you're going to get a pizza voucher that you can take home and have a family pizza party with your family. Making it a family pizza voucher. The second group was told you're going to get cash. The third group was told you're going to get a text from the plant manager saying thank you for all your hard work. And the fourth group was told they were going to be given a choice between cash or pizza. So that's how day one starts. They go off and they do their semiconductor production, and at the end of day one, oh, you darn, believe it or not, performance has increased, because guess what? Incentives work, right? So, most interesting thing though, anybody want to guess how much the cash group had increased their performance? 5%. 5%. Who said that? Fantastic. Have you heard this before?
No.
Did you actually guess? That is a stellar guess. Yes, 5%. The cash group had increased their performance by 5%. The non-cash group, what do you think the non-cash group increased it by?
15.
Oh, y'all are close. Actually, not close at all. It's 6%. You guys really believe in non-cash rewards, which makes sense. So, but there was a 1% difference, and so you can stop there and say, look, clearly the non-cash awards performed better than the cash awards, right? At the end of day one. And maybe that's enough for your client. But actually, it's on what happened on day two that's really, really fascinating. Because on day two, and you could stop measuring there, like this was our study, we did on day one, we had performance, and we stopped measuring here, right? 5% versus 6%, brilliant non-cash awards work. Day two, everybody comes back to work. Guess what happens in the non-cash group? Performance stays elevated. Performance stayed elevated the rest of the week. There was no reward program in place, but it stayed elevated for the remainder of the week in the non-cash group. Anybody want to guess what happened in the cash program? Tanked. 13% below average performance baseline on day two, and continued downward from there. Cost the organization money. So the researchers concluded two things. One, it's going to take a lot more money to get the same amount of performance if you're using cash than if you're using non-cash. Right? A. And B, there is a lot of power in a text message or a message from a manager. And we cannot forget that in the design of our programs. If we design out just the sheer thank you as a part of our program, we are designing out one of the most important parts, like human interaction, just saying thank you. All right, so maybe that is enough to appease your client. Or maybe they go, well, again, smarty pants, fantastic, but we are a tech company, and we have sales, and we do more creative things. We're not producing semiconductors in Israel. And you're like, well, there might be something there as well. Because there's this guy, Ian Larkin, who at Harvard did a great study that was just released a couple of years ago. And it was with a sales company, a technology company here on the West Coast, and it was for highly compensated sales executives, or salespeople, account managers. And these salespeople were a part of two programs at the same time. They were part of a cash accelerator program, which the more that they earned in the quarter, as the quarter went on, the greater their cash accelerator became. And in Q4, they were also in their final ranks of eligibility for the top performer reward program, the trip that everybody went on. And at the end of Q4, these top very highly compensated salespeople had a choice to make of whether they put their sales into Q1 to get the cash accelerator, or whether they kept them in Q4 so that they could make sure they locked in their position on the top performer sales program that's on the trip. So, knowing that they're going to get a lot of money in the cash accelerator program or be able to go on the trip, where do you think most people chose? They chose the trip, right? So even though, and what's fascinating about this is because they knew what the cash accelerator, what those sales looked like, they could calculate how much money salespeople were leaving on the table in order to gain the status of going on this week-long trip, having the star on their card, and being a part of the President's Club. President's Club was about a $4,000, $5,000 trip, and they were willing to leave on the table an average of $30,000. That is why they called this the $30,000 Gold Star. That was the name of the study. Because that's how much the status of this program, they could have bought that trip very easily with the $30,000, but the status of what we produce in these types of programs has absolute value. All right, so everybody think our client's convinced at this point that maybe we should keep on doing what we're doing and maybe invest a little bit more? Because they said, that's great, I'm so glad that you told me all of this. Now, if you would please walk down the aisle to, let me introduce you to Sean, who is going to help you design the programs a little bit better, because I want to make sure that we are getting all of this information. So do you have any information about how these programs are designed effectively? And you can actually say, yeah, well, there's a database of multiple millions of dollars worth of research on it, but I'll go talk with Sean and we'll give him some ideas on some of the things that we can be doing. So you walk in, and the first thing that Sean says to you is, you know what, I was just reading that Forbes article on brain-based leadership, and I want to make sure that everything that we're doing is in line with neuroscience and brain-based leadership. So do you have anything on that? Which you can say, yeah, that's great, because actually using non-cash awards, we know from IRF research that non-cash awards have a higher System 1 response than does cash. To which Sean goes, blink, blink, because you now know way more about neuroscience and about System 1 and System 2 thinking than the article in Forbes would ever talk about. And here's kind of the gist of it, right? So at any given moment in our brain, we have two competing systems. We have System 1, which is represented by the elephant. It is our old brain, it's our hippocampus, it's where all of the knowledge goes through first. All the decisions we make start and go through there. It's very fast, it's multi-threaded, it's very emotional. Right? It is the old brain that's been there since the dawn of our existence. It passes everything through to System 2, which is what we think of as thinking. That System 2 is our prefrontal cortex, and we make decisions. Think of the thinking man, right? He's using his prefrontal cortex, clearly. But using our prefrontal cortex is really slow, comparatively, and it takes a lot of effort. So what happens is the dynamic between System 1 and System 2 is everything passes through System 1 on, if it even passes through, and goes to System 2, and System 2 is a super lazy controller and just says, let System 1 handle it, I don't want to even deal with it. Anybody ever driven to work on autopilot? Yeah, that's System 1 taking over, because System 2 just can't deal at that point, right? So System 1 is, a lot of times just takes over, because System 2 is a lazy controller. And by the way, the elephant is representing System 1 because anywhere System 1 wants to go, it's taking System 2 along on the ride. That's our fight or flight response. But the problem is we can't really see what happens with System 1. So you have to actually put galvanic skin response monitors on people. You have to monitor their pupil dilation and their fixation to understand what's happening in System 1, because System 1 actually drives most of what's happening in System 2. And the study that the IRF did, what we found is that non-cash awards have a higher System 1 response than cash. They have a higher time to first fixation, which means that you fixated your eyes on them much faster than you would on cash, and the highest time to first choice. So just by simply using non-cash awards, we're actually designing in line with brain-based leadership. If you get into those conversations, a lot of times people who are knowledgeable about this will start to talk about Dan Pink and about all of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you want to talk about behavioral economics, you've got to talk about how Dan Pink always says there's only three things that motivate people. It's autonomy, and it's mastery, and it's purpose. And those are only three things that we need to motivate people in organizations in today's environment, especially for creative jobs. Which, you could say true, that those three things are absolutely important. But we need to be really aware of the work that was done by Nita Nori and Paul Lawrence in a book called Driven. Anybody read Driven? How Human Nature Shapes Organizations? It's a great book. And here's what they found, which is so important for us to know. They did a whole series of ways. They looked over about 40 or 50 years of data and research to find out what was netted out around what really drives people in organizations. And they narrowed it down to 4 drives. The drive to acquire goods and services, the drive to bond with both the people that we work with, as well as with bigger concepts like nation and state. We're the only creatures that do that, by the way. We only bond with things like purpose and nation and state. Animals don't do that. The drive to, yes, master, to learn new things, and then to create something, to master it, to keep doing it. And then to defend. That's the kind of the autonomy, to defend the people and the ideas that we hold very dear. That model explains 60% of the employee engagement and intent to quit in most organizations. is what they found. It is the most explanatory model that I have found and that we have seen to date for what drives human motivation, employee engagement, and intent to quit in organizations. And here's kind of the fascinating thing. If you were in the bottom quartile and you were doing really poorly as an organization on acquire and bond and create and defend, and you got really a lot better at one of those drives. Let's say that you gave people a ton more money, right? So that's beating that acquire drive. You would only slightly go up the ranks in your employee engagement and intent to quit. What they found is when all of those things work together, it is a huge accelerator. And here's what is so powerful about what we do from a non-cash reward and recognition standpoint. It's one of the few places that if we're doing it correctly, we're helping people acquire goods and status, right, through the reward itself. We're helping them bond with not only the giver, but with the organization itself. We're helping them learn, because we should be saying, here's why you're being given the award, right? We're helping them learn what's important to the organization. And we're helping them defend these very deeply held beliefs that I am good at what I do, and I chose the right company to work for. So behavioral economics, and especially, I encourage you to go out and look at this book, Driven, How Human Nature Shapes Our Choices. That's just a little bit of the behavioral economics behind why what we do is work that we need to think about. So if we're designing programs, one of the quickest checkboxes we can have when we're sitting down with a client is saying, what are you doing along the acquire, bond, create, learn, and defend? Tell me what's happening in your organization that might fall into these buckets, right? Because we have programs that can address these things. Behavioral economics has a lot to offer us. We've got multiple studies out there talking about it. We've got lots of conversation around things like the halo effect, which is where our brain attaches one concept and emotion to something that's completely different. It is why a bunny banging a drum makes us feel positive about batteries. It is why talking, singing fruit makes us feel good about underwear, right? Because our brain attaches those things together. The peak end rule in behavioral economics talks about how it is the last big emotion from an event that we're going to remember. So, for example, if you have gone through a really lengthy surgery and it has been pretty painful throughout, but it ends with a lot of happiness and no pain, and it ends really well, you're actually going to remember that procedure much more fondly than if you had a short procedure that was relatively painless but ended with a really strong painful emotion. Your brain will actually remember that shorter procedure more and will remember it less fondly, right? So our brain associates those. It's called cognitive bias, which I know you'll never actually use in conversation, but those cognitive bias also comes into things like hyperbolic discounting, which is where our brain favors things that are right in front of us. We tend to overweight things that are right in front of us versus things that are way out in the future. It's like our brain's way of saying, you know, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And here's the thing, if you ever actually use hyperbolic discounting in the conversation with a client, let me know and I would buy you a beer or a glass of wine or your drink of choice, because that's not how we're going to talk to clients. We're going to go in and talk about halo effect and hyperbolic discounting. But what we need to be talking to them about are the design patterns that go behind that, which means if we're going to be talking with people about anything to do with reward and right, we need to talk about the emotion behind it, which is great. This is what we're hearing, by the way, from our end user studies when we're out talking to corporate program owners. They really care about the emotion, and that's great, because you know what? We don't remember anything unless there is an emotion attached to it. That is the moniker that our brains use to recall. So if I got up here and I talked to you like this all day long, like your professor did in stats class when you were in college and you paid a lot of money to go there, you would not remember anything I said. But if I talk to you like this, and you have some emotion attached to what I'm saying, you're going to remember it for a much longer time. So that is why when we should, it's not like, no more talking, no more crying in baseball. You can actually talk about emotion in business now. It's absolutely imperative that we do so. Things like peak end rule, if we have money to put toward, I don't know, a fireworks display at the beginning of the incentive travel trip or at the end, what does peak end rule tell us where we should put it? At the end, right? If we're closing out a program, if we're closing out a big, difficult project, we need to end on a really positive emotion because that is people are going to remember about it. And if we are starting some new programs that last a long time, and we want to really get people engaged, and the payout's only at the end of the program, we need to put in some fast starts and some accelerators so that people get something in the beginning, or they're not going to stay engaged. So you may not talk about all of these behavioral economic theories, but we need to be having the conversation about what that means to the design of our programs. And for bonus points, if we want to be designing like a boss, which I think I might make a sitcom called be designing like a boss, we need to be designing like top performing companies. And there is a study out there which I encourage you to go look at that says the top 10 things, the top performing businesses, how they design differently than average performing businesses. But just as a start, if we're out talking to our clients about how to design, we need to make sure we're talking to them about how they consolidated their programs. Because organizations that are top performing organizations are 200 to 300% more likely to have a consolidated employee or a consolidated sales program, one for the entire company. Now, only 40% of all top performing businesses do have a consolidated program, but the difference between top performing businesses and average performing businesses is stark. And this is absolutely a trend that we need to be thinking about and talking about and helping our clients move toward more consolidated programs so that they can take better advantage of that competitive advantage. Top-performing organizations are also more likely to use bottom-up funding. What do we mean by bottom-up funding? That is not where we all sit in a room and go, okay, last year we put $1 million to this program, this year we want to put, I don't know, is the economy going to be good or bad, or when you're growing, okay, we'll put this amount. That is top-down funding. Bottom-up funding is where we sit here and we go, we are going to set aside a certain percentage of employee income, a certain percentage of sales income, or a certain percentage of product sales, specifically for our non-cash reward program. Because top-performing businesses are 80 to 100% more likely to use bottom-up funding. About 60% of those organizations do so. 100% more likely on the employee side and 80% more likely on the sales side. To use bottom-up funding, either per person or per product-based funding for their non-cash reward programs. They are also statistically more likely to value reach over the exclusivity of their program. Used to be when we were designing programs, we would go, we just want to really capture that top performance, only the top performers, right? Exclusively the creme de la creme of your organization. That's not where top performers are focusing anymore. Top performing businesses are focusing on making sure that their programs reach as many of their salespeople, employee, or channel partners as possible. And in fact, they're 100% more likely to value reach over exclusivity in their sales programs, and 80% more likely in their employee programs. And if you want to be provocative and go out and talk to your clients about really what top performers are doing and designing like a boss, you can say, hey, here's an idea, maybe we do away with top stops. We don't have any top stops in our program. We have unlimited funding for the program so that people have unlimited earning potential. That's it. Well, we're awesome. But you can say, you know what, 80% of top performing businesses, 80% have unlimited earning potential in their sales program versus less than half of average performing businesses. Man, they must really believe in those programs, right? If there's no top stop. But it makes sense because they view it as a competitive advantage, right? All right, so we're done somewhat. We've built the business case to our internal customer. We've designed like a boss, built in some behavioral economics and some top-performing design patterns. We also need to be thinking differently about the measurement of our programs. Specifically, 40 years ago, we used to run programs for the 3 S's. Not the 3 S's that you have in the military, but for the 3 S's that we have in the in incentives, that's sales, safety, and service. But over the last 40 years, obviously business has changed, and Michelle did a great job of covering this yesterday as well, is that the economy, since over the last 40 years, has gone from where we primarily produce tangible products, right? We produce products and we put them in warehouses and we service those products, we ship those products, right? That's 83% of the S&P 500 back in 1975. In 2015, 87% was in intangible assets. Okay, well, what are intangible assets? And it really doesn't matter what you and I think of intangible assets, because there's actually a financial definition. And by the way, the GAAP accounting principles, they are really struggling and have been struggling for years to understand the valuation of intangible assets. And they've said it's really 4 things. One, it's your brand. So that's your reputation and your trademarks. 2, it's your market position. It's your customer lists and your licenses. It's your business systems, so your algorithms and your software that you develop. It's your knowledge, so it's all of your intellectual property and all of your innovation processes. And the fascinating thing about all of those intangible assets is they only exist in 3 places. They exist on the document that's printed out somewhere, they exist in zeros and ones in some computer system, or they exist in people. That is where the vast value of our economy right now sits. Well, if that's true, then where we see non-cash award programs targeted should have changed over the last 40 years. The objectives for which these programs are running should have changed, yeah? And yeah, it has. It's no longer just about sales and safety and service. Michelle did a great job yesterday talking about culture. And yes, we're now tracking with the Incentive Federation of 30 different objectives for non-cash reward and recognition programs. And you see it pop up everywhere. Culture is very, very important. Training, cost reduction, in the channel talking about mind sharing, product knowledge, and brain compliance. Right? These are all very important objectives for which non-cash reward programs are run. But here's the thing. Those things are less measurable sometimes than a lot of the ROI and things that we talk about clients with. So we did a study just a couple of, actually last year, where we looked at how cash programs are evaluated and measured and how non-cash programs are evaluated. And non-cash programs, the people who ran them gave a 5.5 on a 7-point scale, saying our programs actually add not just tangible ROI value, but all kinds of intangible value through training program, teamwork, organizational learning, morale, culture, or engagement with organizational values and innovation. Cash programs did not do the same. When we and how we measure we need to think about that a little differently as well. And I gave that example before. If we stop, and this was a study that was done at Northwestern, if we stop measuring at the end of the program, whether that's a day or a week or a month, we are missing a lot of the performance, the increased performance that goes on in these programs, both tangible performance and intangible, like I just talked about. And a great example of that is a study that was done by Kim Kelly, actually just last year. Sorry, 2 years ago now, reported last year. And it was actually a rug sales wholesaler. And they had 2 programs. They had a cash program and a non-cash program. And they ran an award for sales, a contest. And at the end of the first program, what they found is that they had pretty similar median sales increase results between the cash and the non-cash program. But as what happened in the second contest, that was really fascinating, because in the second contest, the non-cash program performed wildly better. And when they dug down into why that is, it was because the underperformers in the first contest had actually accessed training video 30 times more than the cash program, because they really wanted that non-cash reward, right? So we have these other types of hidden performance, these intangible results that we need to start measuring. And I have about 7 minutes left and counting. That is a whole lot of information. The moral of the story is if we are going to journey beyond the current results that we're getting, we need to what? Not just talk if reward and recognition is being used, but how and where it's being used. And we need to update what? Our database. We need to constantly be updating our database and understanding how that research is changing to support the design and measurement of our programs. Any questions? Because if you do have questions, I have this fantastic box from CashStar. It's called the Cash Box that I can throw to you for questions. Anyone have a question? Okay, I'm actually not going to pitch this. I have a terrible job, but I will pitch it to you and you can make it go back. That's like the best story I've ever done in my life. This is really exciting. Keep throwing back. Oh, yeah, there we go. Assuming that, I was going to say we were 3 for 3. That's impressive.
So one of your slides, 2 categories, you have corporate gift and merch. How do you differentiate those?
Oh, this is where I love Meg. So corporate gifting is where we are on, I think we define it as like an annual basis, giving clients and awards. Or for example, we gave the example of like a holiday gift for your clients versus an ongoing client loyalty program or an ongoing employee program. Is that accurate? Okay. So that keeps me honest. I tend to get excited in life. I'm just kidding. Any other questions? No? Okay, I think all of these slides are going to be available. Feel free to pass the cash box around, and please hit our website or contact us if you do have any questions, because we are more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for your time and your support from IMA.